Skeleton Crew Season 1. When this show was first announced, I was intrigued by how intentionally different it felt from other Star Wars projects. I love how different it felt tonally and aesthetically, as well as all the influences it seemed to draw from. So did it live up to the hype? Let's find out. As per usual, because I'm reviewing the entire season, I will be including spoilers. Let's start with the plot. I love how the series draws from things like the Goonies, Indiana Jones, Treasure Island, and more. I also really like the initial setup of the series and the way in which the series introduces various mysteries and then slowly answers those mysteries over time. I also like how each episode plays with its tone a little bit. It reminds me of a lot of like semi-serialized shows from like the early 2000s where each episode would kind of experiment with a different genre. That's also something that The Mandalorian did really well, and I feel like this series does that well also. Let's talk specifically about episode 1. I like how we get to see just kind of normal, average, regular people in the Star Wars universe. These people are not Jedi, they're not royalty, they're not super powerful, they're just regular average people. I also really love the way that the main 4 kids are introduced. The show does a great job kind of showing who each one is and defining their dynamics with each other. And I also just love how relatable the kids are. They each kind of have their own set of goals and dreams and really makes you feel like you're a kid again. However, I did feel that the ending was a little bit forced. The idea that you can just press one button and the entire ship takes off and flies to another planet just feels a little bit contrived. I also definitely saw the twist coming that the main pirate in the opening scene was going to be Jude Law. Moving on to episode 2, I really love the aesthetic of this episode. It feels like Tortuga from Pirates of the Caribbean. I also really like how this episode kind of shows the kids' naivety, and I especially like on a thematic level how this episode challenges Wim's worldview that everyone is kind of inherently good and the galaxy is inherently a safe place. And the way that this episode kind of sprinkles in some mysteries regarding the backstory of the planet of Attin works really well. That being said, the bickering between the 4 kids did get a little tiresome. Moving on to episode 3, this episode continues to kind of build the mysteries and develop the main characters. This episode does a great job kind of slowly revealing what's going on with the planet of Attin. I also really like the design of the owl character because it's something we haven't really seen before in Star Wars. And I especially love the ending bit where Jod doesn't leave the kids behind because it's an important piece of character development for him. Moving on to episode 4, I really like how this episode shows how different cultures and societies developed across the Star Wars universe. This episode also did a great job kind of fleshing out Neel's character and his worldview. Him being able to teach other characters about the importance of selflessness was a great touch. I also really like the character development for Fern in this episode. Having her question her role as the leader was really interesting, and I thought it was a great piece of character development for her. And I think this episode does a great job kind of maturing the kids as they learn that war isn't fun and exciting, but actually dangerous and scary. And I think the ending bit where Jod really protects the kids is another piece of character development for him that's really important, because it shows that he does have somewhat of a conscience. The only negative thing I have to say is that I wish we got to see what happened with Jod and the other tribe of people that he gets abducted by. He just kind of shows up later in the episode and has made a deal with him apparently, and I wish we had gotten to see that. I really love the world building in episode 5. The location doesn't feel like something we've seen in Star Wars before, and despite all the CGI, it still feels real and tangible. I also really love the conversation between Wim and Jod at the beginning of the episode. It does a great job kind of showing each character's worldview and how Jod kind of sees a younger version of himself in Wim. I also laughed out loud at the scene where Wim tries to stand up with the lightsaber and be the hero and ends up just dropping it. I do feel that Jod's turn on the kids was a little bit sudden. Having him go from trying to protect them to immediately turning on them just felt a little bit rushed. I really like how episode 6 kind of switches up the dynamics between the main characters and allows each one to go on an arc. This is the episode where we get to learn the most about KB. Her arc about asking for help was really solid. And I also love the ending where all 4 kids work together for the first time. This episode is where they really started to feel like friends, and I think this is where the chemistry between the 4 actors really clicked also. Moving on to episode 7, I call BS on the whole I call unclaimsies thing. That just very much feels like a contrived plot device. That being said, I love the tension in all the scenes with Jod and the pirates. You never know what's gonna happen, and there's a genuine sense of danger. I also love the tension in the scenes where Jod arrives on Attin. I like how the series kind of keeps how evil Jod is willing to be kind of ambiguous. And moving on to the series finale, I actually really liked the reveal of Jod's backstory. The series genuinely kept me guessing whether he was going to be good or evil. I also kind of love the mini arc that Wendle has as he kind of grows to respect his son more. And I love how the kids use the lessons that they learned in previous episodes to help them in this episode. I do think that the ending is a little bit sudden. I wish that we got something kind of resembling an epilogue, just to kind of see where the characters are after the series and how they've grown. Moving on to the characters. Wim is more or less the protagonist of the series, and I think he's a really good protagonist. The actor does a really good job, and I like his flat character arc about believing in the good of the galaxy. You really feel for him and kind of his loss of innocence as he discovers that the galaxy isn't what he hoped it would be. Fern has a more traditional positive change character arc as she kind of learns to lead properly. While her arc is more straightforward, the series does a great job making you feel invested in the character. I love the way that she's kind of introduced as the confident, cool girl, but then we get to see her insecure side. Neel also has a flat arc where he teaches the people of Attin to be more kind and selfless. I also absolutely love his friendship with Wim, and the chemistry between the two actors is great. I also love the prosthetic alien costume. It looks fantastic, even on a TV budget. There's never a moment where it doesn't feel real. KB is the least developed of the four kids, but she still has a bit of an arc. I like how she kind of finally stands up to Fern and comes into her own as a person, and I like the slow reveal of her backstory. I hope that future seasons of the series expand upon her more. Jod is one of the more interesting characters of the Disney Star Wars era. While he's definitely selfish and greedy, he's not necessarily malicious or cruel to the people around him. He does go out of his way to protect the kids as long as they don't come between him and his money. There were several times where I actually doubted that he was going to be evil because of how much he seemed to care for the kids. I also really like how he appears to see a younger version of himself in Wim and partly wants to preserve Wim's innocence because his innocence got stolen from him. So overall, this is a good but not great season of Star Wars TV. I like how it gives us kind of a different tone, new characters, and a new setting. And while there's nothing overtly wrong with this series, it just didn't hit me on an emotional level the way some of the other Star Wars series have. I'm gonna give it a mixed leaning positive review. I definitely want to see more seasons of this show because if they could continue the story and the character arcs of these characters later on and really give them satisfying character arcs, I could definitely see myself looking back more positively on this first season. So that's it. That's my review of Skeleton Crew Season 1. What did you guys think of Skeleton Crew Season 1? If you want to see more Star Wars content, click right here. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.